A tragic love story or a masterfully planned deception? A 67-year-old woman believed she had found the kind of love that comes once in a lifetime. A man who spoke sweet words, who made her laugh, who held her close and promised a future filled with happiness. But in reality she was nothing more than a jackpot. How did a Nigerian man, Eric Edward, convince a wealthy businesswoman that he was her soulmate, only to end her life for a multi-million-dollar insurance payout? Before we take you through the chilling details of this crime, make sure to subscribe and turn on notifications. Sharon Smith had spent her entire life building something that couldn't be taken away, her legacy. She was a self-made woman, a powerhouse in the business world, the kind of success story that others admired. Decades of sacrifice, late nights, and unwavering dedication had secured her financial freedom, allowing her to live comfortably in the heart of New York. But behind all the accomplishments, the accolades, and the wealth, there was an emptiness that not even success could fill. A quiet loneliness that lingered in the spaces between meetings, in the silence of her empty home, in the moments when she longed for companionship. Love had eluded her for years, slipping through her fingers like sand. And just when she had come to terms with the idea that perhaps some people were meant to walk through life alone, he appeared. Eric Edward. He was 30 years old, full of life, full of promise. He had an effortless charm, the kind that made people feel seen, heard, understood. He was attentive, affectionate, always knowing the right things to say and the perfect moments to say them. Where others might have questioned the age gap, Eric dismissed it entirely, convincing Sharon that love had no timeline, no boundaries. He made her feel desired. Special. Like she was finally living the kind of romance she had only ever seen in movies. And for a woman who had spent her life proving herself in boardrooms and business deals, being adored, truly adored, was a feeling she hadn't realized she had been missing. But what Sharon thought was love, was something else entirely. Eric wasn't in this for romance. He wasn't here to build a future or grow old together. He was here for one thing and one thing only, her money. And he was willing to wait as long as it took to get it. Unlike the scammers who drained bank accounts overnight, Eric wasn't interested in small-time theft. He was playing a long game, one that required patience, precision, and the ability to make someone trust him completely. Sharon was smart, successful, and independent. She wasn't someone who could be easily fooled. But love has a way of making even the sharpest minds vulnerable, and Eric knew exactly how to weave the perfect illusion. He listened when she spoke. He remembered the little things. He showed up when she needed him. He made her feel safe, wanted. He planted himself so deeply into her world that before she even realized it, she couldn't imagine life without him. And then, when the timing was just right, he made his move. It wasn't theft. It wasn't manipulation. It was something far more dangerous, trust. Because when Eric suggested that they plan for the future, that they make things official, that she take out a life insurance policy with him as the sole beneficiary, Sharon didn't hesitate. Why would she? He was her partner, the man she had given her heart to. The man who had promised her forever. Signing that paper wasn't just a legal move, it was a declaration of love, a commitment to the life they were building together. But what Sharon didn't know was that Eric had already started counting down the days. He didn't see a future with her. He saw an expiration date. And the moment she signed her name on that policy, her fate was sealed. Did she ever sense it? A shift in the air, a slight change in the way he touched her, the way his kisses felt more like rehearsed performances than genuine affection? Did she ever question why a man so young, so full of life, had chosen her? Or did she push those thoughts away, convinced that for the first time in her life, she had found something real? Maybe she saw the red flags but ignored them. Maybe she didn't want to believe that the person she loved was nothing more than a calculated predator. Or maybe, she never even had the chance to realize it before it was too late. Do you believe in love at first sight? Or is it just an illusion waiting to be shattered? Eric was patient. Calculated. Every step he took was deliberate, every word he spoke carefully chosen. He understood that trust wasn't something he could demand, it was something he had to earn. And so, he played the role of the devoted partner flawlessly. He listened to Sharon's dreams for the future, nodded as she spoke about retirement plans, held her hand as she imagined the golden years they would share together. He became the man she believed she had been waiting for her whole life. He was attentive, affectionate, and always available, showering her with attention that felt like the love story she had always longed for. And once he knew she was completely his, body, mind, and soul, he made his next move. One evening, over a quiet dinner, he brought it up gently, as if it were just another casual conversation between two people planning a future. "We should protect each other," he told her, his voice warm, reassuring. "I want to know that if anything ever happens, you'll be taken care of. And I want you to feel the same security." He watched her reaction carefully, reading every flicker of emotion in her eyes. Sharon smiled, touched by his thoughtfulness. And when he suggested updating her life insurance policy, it seemed like a natural step for a couple deeply in love. After all, wasn't this what partners did? Look out for each other, plan for the unexpected? There were red flags, many of them. But love has a way of silencing warnings, making even the most obvious dangers seem insignificant. Sharon had always been a woman of sharp instincts in business, a woman who could negotiate million-dollar deals without blinking, who could sense deception in the boardroom from a mile away. But in love, she was just like anyone else, vulnerable, hopeful, trusting. She believed Eric's intentions were pure. And so, without hesitation, she signed her name, officially making him the sole beneficiary of her $2.3 million life insurance policy. In that moment, with the stroke of a pen, she unknowingly sealed her fate. To Eric, the document in his hands was more than just a piece of paper, it was a golden ticket. His jackpot. The moment he had been patiently working toward had finally arrived. But there was still one problem: Sharon was alive. And as long as she was, that money remained just a promise on paper. Meanwhile, those closest to Sharon were starting to see the cracks in the perfect romance. Friends noticed the way Eric avoided questions about his past, how he never spoke about a career or personal ambitions. He was always there, always available, yet never seemed to have a real job. It didn't make sense. A 30-year-old man, full of life and potential, suddenly dedicating himself entirely to a woman nearly twice his age? To some, it looked like love. To others, it looked like a setup. The more they watched, the more uneasy they became. At dinner parties, they observed how Eric carefully steered conversations away from personal topics, how he deflected questions about his life before Sharon. They saw how he effortlessly charmed Sharon, how he knew exactly what to say to make her feel like the most adored woman in the world. But they also noticed something else, how, when he thought no one was watching, his expression would shift. The warmth in his eyes would flicker, just for a moment, revealing something colder underneath. It was subtle, but it was there. And those who paid close attention couldn't shake the feeling that something was off. Whispers began circulating. "Have you looked into him? Do you really know who he is? Why does he seem too good to be true?" But Sharon dismissed their concerns. She was in love, and when you're in love, you don't want to believe that the person lying beside you at night is also the one plotting your downfall. She waved away their suspicions, convinced that they simply didn't understand what she had found. "Eric loves me," she told them. "He's different." And in her heart, she truly believed it. But love is a dangerous thing when placed in the wrong hands. And Sharon had just handed her heart, and her fortune, to a man who saw her as nothing more than a paycheck waiting to be cashed. If your friend was in Sharon's shoes, would you try to warn them? Or is love truly blind? It was a bitterly cold winter night when the emergency call came in. A woman, unresponsive, in her upscale New York home. Paramedics rushed to the scene, their boots crunching against the icy pavement as they made their way inside. The lights were still on, a soft glow illuminating the elegant furnishings of the living room. But upstairs, in the master bedroom, an eerie stillness hung in the air. Sharon Smith lay motionless on her bed, her body unnaturally still, the only sound in the room the rhythmic ticking of a bedside clock. On the nightstand, prescription pill bottles stood in stark contrast to an untouched glass of water. An empty wine glass sat nearby, a single red lipstick stain marking its rim. It looked like an accidental overdose. Maybe even self-inflicted. But the moment the investigators stepped into the room, a quiet unease settled over them. Something about the scene felt wrong. Too neat. Too perfect. As if it had been arranged for them to find exactly what they were meant to see. Detectives on the scene took in the details, their trained eyes moving across every inch of the room. At first glance, nothing seemed disturbed. No broken glass. No forced entry. No immediate signs of a struggle. But then came the first red flag, the drugs. The labels on the prescription bottles were unfamiliar. A quick check through Sharon's medical history revealed an unsettling truth: she had never been prescribed anything like the highly potent sedatives found in her system. In fact, there was no record of her ever using prescription sleep aids at all. So if she didn't have access to these drugs, how had they ended up in her bloodstream? And more importantly, who had given them to her? Then there were the bruises. At first, they were easy to overlook, faint marks on her wrists and forearms, just below the skin. But under the harsh light of the forensic camera, they became impossible to ignore. These weren't the result of a simple fall or accident. They were grip marks, the kind left behind when someone is held down by force. Yet, nothing else in the room pointed to a struggle. No overturned furniture. No scratches. No defensive wounds on Sharon's body. It was almost as if she had been rendered helpless before she even had a chance to fight back. And then came the most chilling detail of all: Eric Edward was nowhere to be found. The man who had claimed to love Sharon, who had promised her a future together, had vanished without a trace. Calls to his phone went straight to voicemail. His personal belongings? Gone. The only thing left behind was the growing suspicion that he had been planning this from the very start. The moment detectives ran his name through their system, the case took an even darker turn. Eric Edward wasn't just an opportunist. He was a ghost, a man who had seemingly materialized out of nowhere and embedded himself into Sharon's life with terrifying precision. Authorities wasted no time launching an investigation. Who was Eric Edward, really? What had he been doing before he met Sharon? And why did everything about this so-called accident feel like it had been meticulously orchestrated? The more they searched, the more disturbing the truth became. Eric Edward was a master manipulator. His past was riddled with deception, a trail of false identities stretching across multiple states, and possibly even multiple countries. He had used different names, different stories, but the pattern was always the same. He targeted successful women, women who had built their own wealth, women who were longing for companionship. He slid into their lives like a dream, playing the perfect partner, saying all the right things, making them feel seen, adored, cherished. But beneath the surface, his intentions were anything but romantic. He studied them, learned their vulnerabilities, and gained their trust. And once he had access to their financial assets, once he had secured his place in their world, something always happened. A sudden accident. A mysterious disappearance. A tragic, unexplained death. And then, just like that, Eric Edward would be gone, his tracks carefully covered, his next target already in sight. But this time, he had left behind more than just a broken heart. This time, there was a body. And the walls were closing in on him fast. Do you think this was a crime of passion? Or was it a cold, calculated execution plan down to the smallest detail. The investigation into Sharon Smith's death gained momentum quickly, and law enforcement wasted no time digging into every detail of her final days. Detectives combed through surveillance footage, reviewed her financial records, and meticulously pieced together a timeline that pointed to one undeniable fact: Eric Edward had planned his escape long before anyone even realized a crime had been committed. Just hours after Sharon was pronounced dead, authorities discovered that Eric had purchased a one-way ticket to Nigeria. The flight was scheduled to depart that very night. His bags had been packed in advance, his accounts had been emptied, and in one swift move, he had attempted to vanish without a trace. But what Eric didn't know was that investigators were already on his trail. As he confidently walked through the airport, thinking he had gotten away with the perfect crime, law enforcement agencies were mobilizing, ensuring he wouldn't make it past the final checkpoint. Sharon's case quickly became a high-profile investigation, drawing the attention of both federal authorities and international law enforcement. The U.S. government, working alongside Nigerian authorities, launched a coordinated manhunt. Eric may have thought he could disappear overseas, but he had underestimated just how much evidence he had left behind. Digital footprints don't lie. His financial transactions painted a damning picture: large cash withdrawals in the weeks leading up to Sharon's death, wire transfers to foreign accounts, and even hotel bookings under different aliases. But what sealed his fate was his own arrogance. Investigators uncovered a series of text messages exchanged between Eric and an unknown contact, where he explicitly discussed Sharon's life insurance policy and his plans to secure the bag once everything was in place. One message, sent just days before her death, read chillingly, "The money is as good as mine." With evidence mounting, authorities moved swiftly. A joint operation between U.S. and Nigerian law enforcement led to Eric's arrest in Lagos, where he had been hiding under yet another false identity. When officers stormed the small apartment he had been staying in, they found him in the middle of making plans to flee yet again. He had already secured fake passports, multiple cell phones, and large sums of cash. But it was too late. The moment he was placed in handcuffs, his carefully constructed web of lies began to unravel. He was extradited back to New York to face justice, and as he stepped off the plane, shackled and surrounded by law enforcement, the media swarmed, cameras flashing, reporters shouting questions he refused to answer. His once charming facade was gone. The man who had so effortlessly manipulated and deceived now looked defeated, knowing that his days of playing the role of the perfect lover were over. The trial that followed was nothing short of explosive. Prosecutors came prepared, presenting an overwhelming mountain of evidence against Eric. Financial records showed his direct involvement in altering Sharon's life insurance policy to make himself the sole beneficiary. Surveillance footage revealed him purchasing the very prescription drugs found in Sharon's system. But perhaps the most damning piece of evidence came in the form of a voice recording, one that sent chills down the spines of everyone in the courtroom. In the audio, Eric was heard laughing with an associate just days after Sharon's death, arrogantly boasting, "It's like winning the lottery." His words were laced with an unsettling amusement, as if he had played a game and emerged victorious. The jury sat in stunned silence as the recording played, the weight of his callousness sinking in. Any shred of doubt that he had orchestrated Sharon's murder vanished in that moment. But Eric wasn't ready to go down without a fight. In a desperate, last-ditch effort, he took the stand in his own defense, spinning a tale of innocence that no one believed. It was all just a misunderstanding, he claimed, his voice cracking under the pressure. "I loved Sharon. I would never hurt her." He painted himself as the victim, insisting that the evidence had been twisted, that the money transfers were innocent, that the texts had been taken out of context. But the prosecution dismantled his defense piece by piece, exposing every inconsistency, every carefully rehearsed lie. The jury wasn't buying it. As the closing arguments were made, one thing became clear: this wasn't just a case of financial fraud. This was a calculated, cold-blooded murder driven by greed and deception. When the jury finally delivered their verdict, the tension in the courtroom was palpable. Guilty. On all counts. The weight of his crimes had finally caught up to him. Eric Edward, once a man who had seamlessly slipped through the cracks of justice, was now facing the consequences of his actions. And as the judge sentenced him to life in prison, his expression remained blank. No charm. No remorse. Just the realization that his days of manipulation were over, and the only future he had left was behind bars. Do you think justice was truly served? Or do criminals like Eric Edward always find a way to slip through the cracks? For Sharon, love was never supposed to be a game of survival. She had spent decades building her legacy, surrounding herself with trusted friends, and giving back to her community. Yet, in the end, her biggest vulnerability was not her wealth, but her unwavering belief that she had finally found someone to share her world with. Eric Edward did not just steal her money, he stole her trust, her dreams, and ultimately, her life. But the truth has a way of catching up with those who try to outrun it. His plan was meticulous, his deception carefully woven into a fantasy that crumbled the moment the authorities connected the dots. He had manipulated, calculated, and executed every move with precision. Yet, he had underestimated one thing: justice. And now, behind cold prison walls, stripped of the lavish future he envisioned, he is left with nothing but the weight of his own crimes. As the world moves forward, Sharon's name remains etched in the memories of those who loved her, a heartbreaking reminder of how trust, once misplaced, can have devastating consequences. Her story is not just about one woman's tragic fate, it is about the dangers of ignoring warning signs, about the cost of believing in love without question, and about the irreversible damage caused by one man's insatiable greed. Perhaps the most unsettling question of all remains: was Eric always this way, or was it his hunger for wealth that turned him into a monster? We may never truly know, but one thing is certain: the price of his deception was far greater than he ever imagined. If this story shocked you, hit the like button. If you want more real crime cases that expose the truth, subscribe and turn on notifications. We've got another mind-blowing case dropping tomorrow. Trust me, you won't want to miss it. Until next time, stay safe and always be aware of the people you trust.